My name is Trevor Getz. I'm a professor of African and World History at San Francisco State University. And history education is one of the areas that I'm most interested in. I'm currently interim chair of the Department of Secondary Education, so training teachers. In 2004, when trying to do some research for a project on the Fonte Confederation, I learned that my work wasn't being really relevant for communities in the central region in Ghana. And that's what started me, I think, on the last 20 years of my career, figuring out how to make history that's both accurate and intellectually sustainable, but also relevant to communities. I grew up in South Africa, and I'd especially say I grew up sitting next to my grandfather, who told me stories about the war, which for him was the Second World War. And that's what interested me in history. I thought, in fact, I was going to become a military historian for a while. I'm now about as far away from that area as you can get, with my interests really in marriage and culture and enslavement. After I graduated from Berkeley with degrees in history and anthropology, I went to the University of Cape Town to pursue a project looking at Namibian history during the South African occupation. And that moved me into political history under the tutelage of Chris Saunders, who was a fantastic mentor at the University of Cape Town. While I was there, I heard a talk from Richard Rathbone at the School of Oriental and African Studies about Ghanaian history. And that's what really moved me into West African history. I wanted to work with him. And then in 1998, started my dissertation at SOAS, went to Ghana, spent some time in Senegal, and that was that. I was sold on West African history. You know, Richard Rathbone is an incredible social historian. The talk that he gave on murder in colonial Ghana, I think, really suggested to me a different kind of colonialism that I'd ever seen before. You know, in South Africa, I was used to really a settler colonial model. And I suddenly realized that these things, this whole global thing, was more complex. There's a younger generation of particularly West African born and trained scholars who are in really interesting ways pushing the edges of environmental history and pushing on gender and affect and, you know, many of the places that I think the field of African history in general is going. I guess the two places that I think there's real opportunity in the future that has been underdeveloped. Number one would definitely be in linguistic history. When you look at what scholars working in Central Africa have been able to do around linguistic stratigraphies and looking at words and things and such, we have yet to really take that up in West African history as thoroughly. And I look forward to the scholars who'll do that. In the field of West African history, there just aren't enough scholars, I think, who are interested in how scholarship on the history of West Africa makes its way into elementary and secondary school classroom to really excite the next generation of historians. I love reading science fiction. The new generation of Nigerian science fiction authors, for me, is not only, you know, something that's fun and you can be passionate about, but it's deeply intellectual. It's deeply scholarly. I love Lego. The way Lego ignores Africa is deeply troubling to me. And so for me, Lego and Africa as well is an intellectual topic. I guess the two things that aren't intellectual topics for me that I really enjoy are my dog and fishing. It's been my great pleasure to work with Mike Gomez and a number of other scholars on developing the hidden voices of the global African diaspora curriculum for New York City. And, you know, under Mike's leadership, we developed a really great curriculum for students in New York, and it's free for students elsewhere. that included a lot of work on West Africa and West African. But since that sort of central curriculum, we've been able to make some fantastic comics. And yeah, I also work a lot with veterans. I remember I wanted to be a military historian at one point. I work with African-American veterans in particular. Just brought out a series of documentary, and I'm about to bring out a graphic history with Oxford University Press with Liz Clark and with some African-American veterans themselves on the experiences of the first African-American Marines during the Second World War. I've been involved with JWAH for at least 6 or 7 years. I was actually an author first. With Lindsay Erisman, published a piece on the claims that wives make in early colonial West Africa, Ghana in particular, and particularly sort of the Gold Coast. I came to a big conference that Wando Achebe, the editor-in-chief, put together in Michigan State, and became excited at the possibility of really helping to mentor some young West African scholars to get their articles in shape for publication. And then at a certain point, I guess I was active enough that Dr. Achebe asked me if I wanted to be an editor on a sort of expanded board, and I jumped at the opportunity. I've been really pleased to see what the journal has done, and I will always measure its success by the meaning it brings not only to readers but to those who become authors within it. And I think we've had a pretty big impact. I'm really excited about our forthcoming forum teaching the slave liberation database in Senegal in American classrooms and Senegalese classrooms. That's really exciting to me. Seeing something that's complex but an important database that really smart scholars have been working on, to see that transformed into curriculum that can help students think about experiences of young people put into tutelage systems, essentially indentured servitude in Senegal, and what that felt like for them, what their perspectives are, and how this connects to world history. That's exciting for me.